Hello and welcome to PMCLounge.com. Today we are discussing the identify stakeholders process as well as the key output of this process, which is stakeholder register. Now, as always, if you're into reading articles, first link in the description below is going to take you to a relevant article on this topic over at our official website PMCLounge.com, so you can check that out. Second and third links will be the playlists of every single video that we have done on stakeholder management knowledge area, as well as your questions answered. That will be the third playlist, your questions answered about stakeholder management. So your FAQs, which we call the Lounge Fever series, that will be the third link in the description below. So three links, you can check them out whenever you feel like. For now, let's get started. So what do you really do when you are assigned a project in real life? You try to find out who all are the people that you're dealing with, right? You identify stakeholders. So this is basically one of the first few things that you're going to do on your project, and that is to identify stakeholders. This is the first process in the stakeholder management knowledge area. Another important point to note is that this is the second of the only two processes in the initiating process group. The first one was develop project charter, which we have already covered. Of course, it is part of the integration management knowledge area. The only second process, the two processes that we have in initiating process group are develop project charter and identify stakeholders. So this is the second one. This is the PGKA mapping, focusing just on the stakeholder management knowledge area. We have four processes in this knowledge area. And of course, today what we are discussing is identify stakeholders, part of the initiating process group. So since this process is all about identifying stakeholders, that's what you're doing. You're identifying stakeholders. The result of this process, the output, the key output is going to be a list of stakeholders, because you would have identified the stakeholders by the time you are done with this process. So this list of stakeholders is known as stakeholder register. So that's something you need to understand. This is a key output of this process, which is also the second topic that we are going to discuss in this video, stakeholder register. As far as the inputs of this process, the identify stakeholders process, that is, as far as the inputs are concerned, this is nothing that you haven't already studied. In fact, it will be a good exercise to try to figure out on your own what documents do you need as an input to identify all the stakeholders of your project. Do you need the project charter? Let me know in the comments. A quick reminder, we have our free study plan available on pmclounge.com/pmp study plan. This will help you clear your PMP exam in 50 days. So grab your study plan right now on this link, pmclounge.com/pmp study plan. All right, so let's talk about the second topic of this video, which is the stakeholder register. Like I said earlier, this is a key output of the identify stakeholders process. And obviously, stakeholder register is going to contain the name of all the stakeholders. But in addition to that, it also contains their goals, their expectations, their concerns, and other such details. In fact, in the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the elements of the stakeholder register. It is not an exhaustive list, but it is something that you can refer to when you are creating your stakeholder register. So obviously it is not a list of just the names, it contains some other details as well. You should note here that most projects succeed or fail based on how well the project manager knows and manages the stakeholder expectations. Expectations was something which was mentioned as part of the stakeholder register as well. So that means you have the stakeholders expectations documented, and you need to manage and know the stakeholders expectations. That's where your project's success or failure depends on. So very important point here, the third one, you need to read it again. Most projects succeed or fail based on how well the project manager knows and manages stakeholders' expectations. These expectations are jotted down, are documented in the stakeholder register. So we just talked about how the expectations of the stakeholders should be documented in the stakeholder register. Let's look at some of the other things that you need to document as part of this register. Number one, name and role of the stakeholder, pretty straightforward. Group or department of the stakeholder. Why? Because stakeholders of similar group may have similar needs. And based on this department that you have identified, right, you will be able to also take a decision on who needs to be communicated what kind of detail does a certain stakeholder require. Let's say you have 10 people who are from the testing department. They are the testers on your project. They are going to test the code. So in the code review meetings with other coders, do you need to invite these testers as well? Do you need to invite someone from the testing department? Not really. This is something just for the coders. This is a peer review that the coders have organized. So you need not communicate about this with the people from the testing department. So that's why if you have the department of your stakeholders clearly documented, you will be able to involve them only when it is required. Classification, what is the difference between classification and department, you might ask? So you classify the stakeholders in two groups. First is they are either internal or external. So someone from outside the organization can also be a stakeholder. The government can also be a stakeholder, right? So government is definitely an external stakeholder. So you need to understand whether a stakeholder is internal or external. If you work in a service based organization where you are developing a project for your customer, the customer is going to be an external stakeholder, while everyone from your organization are going to be internal stakeholder, right? So that's first group that you can classify your stakeholders in. And the second group that you can classify your stakeholders in are their outlook towards the project. How do you think they perceive the project? Are they a supporter of the project? Are they neutral to the project? Are they resistor of the project? So you need to classify every stakeholder as either internal or external, and one of these three, a supporter, a neutral, or a resistor for your project. So that's also something that you document as part of the stakeholder register. Now, this gives you a hint. Do you think this stakeholder register is a document that should be publicly available for everyone to review and see? Let me know in the comments and give your reasons as well. All right, number four, the fourth element of stakeholder register is responsibilities. So what are these stakeholders responsible for? It could range from attending meetings. They are someone from, let's say, higher management. You don't really need their help. All you need is to make sure that they are aware of what's happening as part of your project. So all that you need from them is that they attend meetings. So that's their responsibility. But let's say you have coders, right? You have testers. So their responsibilities as part of this project include doing the actual work of coding and testing as well. So every stakeholder, you should know what their responsibilities are. Finally, expectations, something that we spoke of in the previous slide. Expectations, it could basically mean what the stakeholders believe would be the result of the project. What is the output that the stakeholders expect from the project? This can also be seen as their requirements, but in certain texts, you will find that they differentiate between stakeholder expectations and stakeholder requirements. How can you differentiate between expectations and requirements? Well, it's the same case as you might have seen on YouTube, where you have videos that are titled as expectations versus reality. So expectations is everything that a stakeholder is expecting to happen as part of this project, while requirement is basically the reality. What do you think is going to happen as part of this project? So finally, overall, the stakeholder register should be able to tell you what is the value that every individual stakeholder can gain out of the project. Value is the keyword here. What is the value that every individual stakeholder is getting out of your project? So ideally, you should be able to look at the stakeholders entry, one stakeholders entry in the stakeholder register. You should be able to look at their name, their department, their classification, what do they expect out of the project, and you should be able to understand what is the value that they are getting out of this project. That's the whole idea behind creating this exhaustive document known as stakeholder register. Finally, question for this video: who do you think is the most important stakeholder in your project? There are no wrong answers here. Let me know in the comments. Who do you think? Who is that one person that is most important stakeholder of your project? Don't write project manager. You are really important, but you are the one creating this stakeholder register. So apart from you, who do you think is the most important stakeholder? Let me know in the comments. Definitely looking forward to your answers. So that's all that we had in this video. I hope you were able to understand the process of identifying stakeholders as well as the output, which is stakeholder register. Hit that like button if you got value out of this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified whenever we upload new content. Also, don't forget to check out the website pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP resource. Thank you and have a nice day.